historic visit to the United Kingdom at the invitation of King Charles III. A diplomatic event rich in symbolism and political significance. The visit marks the first time in 37 years that a Nigerian leader has been accorded full state honors by Britain, underscoring the enduring yet evolving relationship between the two countries. State visits represent the highest level of diplomatic engagement, combining ceremony with strategic dialogue. For Nigeria and the United Kingdom, this meeting comes at a moment when both nations are seeking to redefine their partnership around trade, security, cooperation, migration, management, and investment flows. Beyond the pageantry of royal receptions, the visit will inevitably focus on substantive issues. Nigeria is looking to deepen economic cooperation with Britain, attract investment into key sectors, and strengthen collaboration on security challenges, including terrorism, organized crime, and cyber threats. Business groups on both sides are already urging expanded trade and investment ties as part of the visit's agenda. Another dimension is the large and influential Nigerian diaspora in Britain, one of the most dynamic African communities in the United Kingdom. Engagements with this diaspora community is expected to feature prominently, reflecting their growing economic and cultural influence in British society. There are also sensitive political and humanitarian conversations expected behind closed doors. These include concerns about religious tensions and violence in parts of Nigeria, issues that may surge in discussions involving faith leaders and organizations during the visit. Now, ultimately, the visit is both symbolic and strategic. Strategic because both countries are seeking to reposition their partnership in a rapidly changing global order, where economic diplomacy, security cooperation, and geopolitical alignments matter more than ever. So the key question, however, is whether the pomp of Windsor will translate into concrete outcomes, new investments, deeper cooperation, and measurable benefits for both nations, or just another exercise in diplomatic ceremony. So on this edition, we shall examine the politics, the interests, and the stakes behind the visit. And we shall get to meet our guests right after this timeout. Stay with us.
Stories now break online. Don't miss anything from our real-time updates and exclusive content. Follow and participate in discussions on live TV studio programs to shape the narratives. Subscribe, engage, and share from AIT.live at AIT_online on X, AIT Online on Facebook, Official AIT Live on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads on YouTube. Stay connected with AIT. On air, online, on live.
All right, let's get to meet our guest analysts who are joining us here in the studio and virtually. First here in the studio is Ambassador Humphrey Ojiako. Ambassador Ojiako is a retired Nigerian diplomat who served Nigeria in different missions around the world in his active days in service. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Right.
Thank you. Sure.
Also joining us virtually from Jos in Plateau State is Professor Chris Kwaja. Professor Kwaja is a professor of international relations and strategic studies. Like I said, he's joining us from Jos. Thank you so much, Prof, for joining us.
Thank you.
Great. Right, so let's begin this way, Ambassador. Nigeria has a unique relationship with the United Kingdom as its former colonial master. Well, if you look at it, since President Tinubu came into power in 2023, he has made 3 state visits. First to Germany, to France, and then to Turkey. This will be his 4th state visit. Many would have thought that Britain, because of our unique relationship, would have been the first of all these state visits. What do you think is responsible for the delay?
Thank you, Moni, for having me on this program today. The special relationship, if we may say that, between the UK and Nigeria is just a matter of history. It's a matter of evolution. And when you have a past master who has apparently released you from serving as a servant and becoming a co-equal, sometimes the relationship is not as smooth, it's not as enticing, it's not as deep as maybe people will expect it to be, given the good, the bad, the ugly that may have happened in the course of that relationship. However, for Britain and Nigeria, it has been mostly a very cordial relationship. Even though it has taken the UK 37 years or thereabouts to get another Nigerian leader to visit at the highest level of diplomatic engagement. This time, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. The fact remains that even through the years of military rule and all the turbulent era that Nigeria has passed through, Britain has not been actually absent. Yes, at the highest level of engagement, this is the first time we are saying that, but it does not mean that that relationship has not always been strong, effective, and probably achieving the results commensurate with the investments made into them.
Prof, let me come to you. 37 long years before another state visit. The last state visit was in 1989, and that was when General Ibrahim Babangida was military president of Nigeria. I mean, why do you think it has taken this long for a Nigerian president to be invited? Indeed, between the last time the Babangida visited the UK, we have had presidents, 3 or 4 presidents, as it were. But it's only now getting the UK to invite a Nigerian president on a state visit.
I think it's also important to correct this impression that presents the situation as if because a state visit is happening, there has not been other formal visits by Nigerian presidents. There has been visits under Buhari. We've had instances where President Buhari visited the UK. The difference between a state visit and the regular visits that presidents undertake is that a state visit is typically one in which the host country is responsible for your transportation, for your accommodation, for your security, and a state dinner is organized, there is a guard of honor and all that. So it's a very elaborate visit. And that's what differentiates a state visit from a normal visit that the president or head of state or head of government undertake in the context of those diplomatic exchange. So we've had visits that have happened under Obasanjo. Several times President Obasanjo visited. Jonathan did the same. Buhari did the same. But I think this visit is unique in the sense that the government and people of the United Kingdom is formally calling on President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to come. I assume that all the logistics surrounding that visit will be handled by the government of the UK. Now, the question is, what does such a visit represent for Nigeria? I think for me, from the perspective of diplomacy, such a visit represents a deliberate attempt by the government of the UK and Nigeria to strengthen their relationships culturally, economically, security-wise, as well as in the context of development cooperation. In the last 20 years or thereabout, the government of the UK has been quite active in supporting peace and security efforts in Nigeria, from the NCRP, MCN, and now the Spring Project, which are deliberate attempt to support peace-related efforts in Nigeria. For me, the focus now will be, how do we, again, review where we are in terms of the governmental support, in terms of corporate UK support, investment in Nigeria? Where is the UK when it comes to its support in our oil and gas industry, in agro-business, for instance? How positioned is Nigeria in terms of getting the UK to open its own borders for Nigerian products to get into the UK? To what extent have we improved on our own agri-business to allow for such cooperation or such investment in the UK? I know that security will be an issue because Nigeria is the main doorway to Africa and West Africa. And this continent is very strategic to the UK. And if it is very strategic to the UK, Nigeria is a major actor. Let's not forget that when Babangida visited the UK, when he did, at the time he did, Nigeria was at the forefront of pushing the agenda on what we call the concert of medium powers. That is to say, bringing countries that are neither within the developed and the least developed together. We were at the middle, and Nigeria was playing a major role in that context. And today the issue is, you recall what the UK Prime Minister said about the medium powers coming together, that they are the ones that will make things happen in the global economy. And Nigeria is very strategic to that conversation. So we need to Nigeria need to get its act together. We need to be visible. We need to be active. We need to ensure that the ambassador, the High Commissioner we are sending to the UK is someone who understands the strategic place of Nigeria in terms of Nigeria-UK relations, in terms of Nigeria-EU relations, because of the closeness between the UK and the EU, and how many of the issues that concerns the EU are also issues that concerns the UK and, by extension, the United States.
All right, Ambassador, so much has been put on the table by Professor Kwaja, talking about what would constitute the shared interests between the UK and Nigeria. At this point in time, in the present world order, what are your expectations of this visit? What do you think will top the agenda? What do you think Nigeria will be putting on the table?
Thank you for bringing, and thank you, Professor, for giving us this tour de force of where Nigeria and Britain should be going. But let's trace something back a little bit so that we put this things in proper perspective. A few years ago, the UK exited from the European Union. There are quarters across both the UK, across Europe, and Nigeria who feel that that was a very big strategic error on the part of Great Britain. What advised it? Issues of taking responsibility in diplomacy, not of equals, but diplomacy, exiting a diplomacy of equality to a diplomacy of opportunity. So it appeared as if the UK, those who were pushing Brexit, actually believed that it was possible to rebuild a modicum of the former British Empire before the Second World War that brought all that to an end. So for 37 years, when Nigeria had this level of state visit with Great Britain, Britain was still a staunch member of the European Union, a moving force in the European Union. Today, Britain has exited the European Union. And you could see, international observers of geopolitics can see that that exit has put the UK in a position to try to reach out to especially some of its former colonies, its former vassal states, both from Australia to Canada to the rest of the world. In Africa, Nigeria is a key country in that matrix, in that context. So coming to Nigeria at this time to try to rebuild what was lost is also something that should come into consideration when dealing with this. So we are sure that those who are advising President Tinubu on this visit will bear this at the back of their mind, that there is a difference between a diplomacy of opportunity and a diplomacy of equal partnership. Are we going to get a substantive relationship of equal partnership to Britain following this trip? This is important to consider. So some of the very important things that have been outlined, anybody who listened to the introduction of this will realize there is a very tall order, from security to stability issues to economic issues of growth and development, investment, and so on. Let's be honest and frank. Was there any time really that Britain disengaged formally from doing any of these things with Nigeria? No. But they have not been as effective as they would be. I'm sure those who prepared Mr. President for this trip would have stressed the fact that the biggest constraint to Nigeria's growth, relevance, importance in global geopolitics today is security and insecurity matters. This is a huge, huge problem. And let me say this without mincing any words. The UK, Britain, whether you're a historian or an internationalist or an analyzer of global affairs, global geopolitics, Britain bears a vicarious responsibility for the stability and insecurity status of Nigeria today. This is history, it is not fiction. So how much has Britain actually, we know, yes, there is cooperation in the military area, in the security area, intelligence sharing, and all of that. But is it enough? Should it, in fact, be the United States that is dropping Tomahawk missiles in Sokoto as if that would be a solution to the Nigerian insecurity problem? Or should it be a Britain that understands Nigeria from its inners, both its topography, its geography, its demography, its cultural aspects? Britain should be at the helm of equipping the Nigerian armed forces with rapid response capabilities. I think that's what Nigeria needs. Obviously, that is something the president of Nigeria has the greatest opportunity to deal with. It's not the ceremonies, it's not the razzmatazz, it's not the press coverages and the optics, as we say. It is the substantive. And this offers the president a very unique opportunity to not only persuade the British Crown, but the British Parliament and the British Prime Minister that what Nigeria needs at this time is to restore security and stability in the country. And the easiest and best way to do it is to re-equip Nigeria with rapid response capabilities, its military, its police, so that we don't keep hearing these stories of a horde of motorcycle-riding terrorists or murderers or bandits moving from place to place, slaughtering people anyhow, and by the time the military or the police comes, the action is already concluded and they've left. So we're not being preemptive, we're not being responsive in the moment. That is the capability Nigeria needs. I'm sure the president is not unaware of this, and that's probably something he should be pushing Britain to collaborate with Nigeria in doing, and not the normal optics of, oh, Britain is helping us, America is helping us. All those things, what do they amount to? We have come to a stage where insecurity should no longer govern or determine how Nigeria is ruled and run. And that is where we are at.
Ambassador, very quickly, what would you consider to be the major elements of diplomacy of opportunism or diplomacy of equal partnership?
In a diplomacy of equal partnership, it's better to give an example. When Britain joined the European Union in the 1960s and 70s, it did not expect the same, for instance, trade patterns with its European partners. It didn't expect any European country to be producing raw materials, exporting to British factories to produce finished goods and services and return to them. That is a diplomacy of equal partnerships, in which case goods, trades, and services that crisscross the borders could be considered as equal, complementary. But in a diplomacy of opportunity, you have something like a colonial relationship where one party is by far weaker than the other party. And in such a situation, it is unrealistic usually to expect, yes, in the diplomatic lingo, in the language, it is called equal partners and all of that. But in reality, we know that equality is a function of what are you sending to me as goods, what are you sending to me as a service, what am I sending to you in exchange. So that colonial trade pattern is what I was referring to as Britain looking at its position in global geopolitics today and wondering, is it not better to go back to what we are used to, where we have a relationship with Nigeria in which gold, lithium, and all the solid precious minerals come to Britain for processing, in which agricultural produce come to Britain and they return these things to Nigeria and so on. But things have changed a lot, so Nigeria has options, and that is what strengthens the hands of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu on this trip, because it is no longer that time, 37 years ago, when China was also, for instance, a country seeking for entries into European market, into American market, and so on. China is today a major player in the global economic environment. And Nigeria, like so many other countries around the world, have sort of pivoted quite a significant portion of their businesses and their political and economic lives towards China. So today, it is no longer a question of you don't have a choice, but to deal with us. So the president is in a very good position to extract some really important outcomes from this trip. Not the razzmatazz, not the show, not the optics. I have said that already. And one of the things he could get, for instance, I was watching the news this morning, and there was this movement of people they called suspected terrorists in Akure airport. Again, and then about 4 of them were arrested. In a situation where Nigeria had rapid response capabilities, helicopter gunships would have already been dispatched to clear these people. What are they doing in the airport, for goodness sake? So Britain has that capacity. Nigeria doesn't have it. Nigeria needs it. In exchange for whatever is being arranged between Nigeria and the UK, these are the things our president will be looking at. Can the Nigerian Armed Forces be reorganized in such a way with the assistance and cooperation, collaboration of the UK, both in terms of intelligence sharing, both in terms of equipment provision, and so on? We don't need long-range missiles or short-range missiles. We need helicopter gunships. We need intelligence. We need surveillance equipment to look at what is going on in Sambisa, what is going on in Borno, what's going on in Katsina, what's going on in Akure, and so on, and be able to respond in the moment and not after the fact. Britain can collaborate with Nigeria in that capacity. Because indeed, Imoni, I tell you, if Nigeria's security and instability problems are sorted out, the sky is Nigeria's limit, even if that is a limit for Nigeria to grow, develop, and depend on itself, because I don't see what we don't have here.
Professor Kwaja, recorded in 2024, Nigeria and UK elevated their relations to that of strategic partnership. That was in November 2024. And that partnership, that strategic partnership was anchored on 6 pillars. 6 pillars of growth and jobs, mutual national security. Again, security keeps reoccurring in every discussion around Nigeria's foreign relations. Migration, justice, and home affairs. These were the 6 pillars of that time. And then in 2025, again, it was in November 2025, Nigeria and the United Kingdom held their 3rd defense security dialogue. That was in July, I beg your pardon, of 2025. And that discussion, that dialogue held in London. Since then, it does appear not much has happened in all these areas we are talking about, whether it's in the 6 pillars of the strategic partnership or of the 3rd security dialogue that took place just last year. Now, President Tinubu is heading to London again. And like Ambassador has said, perhaps we should look at what could actually strengthen the hands of the president as he goes to the United Kingdom, and what kind of partnerships or demands he can be making on his former colonial, Nigeria's former colonial master.
Yeah, I am aware that in all these 6 pillars, there has been specific efforts put in by the UK government in terms of strengthening that support. There are aspects of it that I have worked on, particularly in the area of security, the area of justice, where the FCDO, for instance, has been quite active. The same for agriculture, that right now you find the Spring Project of the UK government supporting agro-business enterprises at the subnational unit. I think what needs to be done, I'm sure, with the kind of people I see working with the Nigerian president, and I will give you an example, the efforts made by the National Security Advisor when it comes to how he was able to manage the US-Nigeria partnership in recent times. I think the same approach needs to be adopted with the UK government, particularly building on the strength of that partnership. We need to make it visible. We need to make it constructive and beneficial for Nigeria. It should not be episodic. It should not be opportunistic. There should be a stronger, more active, and more constructive partnership that is visible to Nigerians, and Nigerians can measure. I don't have a sense of what the briefing book of Mr. President looked like, but my sense is that there should be a briefing book for the president that does a review of what has been the nature of UK-Nigeria relationship in the past, the impact of such relationship and what the outlook should be in terms of the future of UK-Nigeria partnership, security, for instance. What is Nigeria's national security priority? And how can a UK-Nigerian relationship or partnership support such a priority? I think for me, from that perspective, we can use that model to measure trade, to measure cultural diplomacy, to measure health, for instance, because these are all areas that are very important from the perspective of how we strengthen health security in Nigeria. The volume of UK-Nigeria trade is more than £7 billion. How is that beneficial to Nigerians? How is that beneficial to the UK? This is what an analysis of such a visit does, because Mr. President must be empowered with the right data, with the right information and intelligence, that in a way that makes him get value for such a visit. And value for such a visit will be derived by the quality of advisors that Mr. President is going for that visit with. Because it's a conversation. It's a power conversation. And in a power conversation, you must be armed with the right information and intelligence. And it takes a president with the right persons to do that. And I think, for me, looking at the makeup or the setup of the Office of National Security Advisor, I think we've got that when it comes to security. On trade, do we have that? On other foreign policy priorities, do we have that? It is important that beyond this visit, Nigeria should sit down as a government to look at how well we're able to maximize foreign relations. Because once we do that, we will have a template for engaging every other country. Mr. President was in Turkey. Months after the Turkey visit, where are we with respect to the takeaways, with respect to the to-do list of Mr. President? Because security was one of the issues that was discussed when Mr. President visited the UK. What is the level of implementation? That, for me, is very important. And I think Mr. President should be able to set up a team that should do a proper analysis of a lot of these visits with a view to looking at the extent to which he has been able to get value for such visits. Because at the end of the day, let his tenure not be measured by the number of visits, but by the quality of this visit. And we have the human resource to do that. We have all the technical know-how that Mr. President requires in country to be able to do that. Because knowledge is very key. And you recall during the Babangida administration, there was an all-Nigerian foreign policy conference. And the whole idea of that all-Nigerian foreign policy conference was to discuss foreign policy from the perspective of how Nigeria is able to maximize the opportunities out there, position itself in order to get it right. And two things happened within that period. One, the Technical Aid Corps was established. Two, the Nigeria House was built in the UK. And Nigeria is one of the countries in New York with a massive building very close to the United Nations. After that, what happened? So we need to relaunch this country. We need to get it right domestically. Domestic stability. We need to ensure that our economy is strong. We need to ensure that we are able to manage our transnational relationships in a way that positions us to deal with many of the external threats that are making it difficult for Nigeria to manage its own internal challenges.
So, maybe for a moment, let's switch gears and look at the relationship between Nigeria and UK as far as the Nigerian diaspora is concerned. Nigeria has one of the largest today. Whole issue of visa restriction and the whole question of migration affecting Nigerians in the UK shape discussions during this visit.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. In fact, the issue of diaspora, Nigeria diaspora, in the UK, in the USA, in Europe, everywhere, has become a major strategic issue for Nigeria. Because if the figures we hear are correct, huge populations in the United Kingdom, huge populations in the United States, people who have not forgotten their home country, who cannot forget their home countries. So we relate to them through this diaspora remittances that are here run into billions of dollars a year. We relate to them through the exchange of knowledge acquired in these places, in their universities and research institutions and so on. Now, agreements are signed, like the Prof just mentioned, the President's last visit to Turkey, and all the beautiful memorandum that was signed. What has come of it? If you go back a little bit further, you'll see that similar memoranda have been signed with the UK, with the USA, with so many countries over the years.
Germany, France?
Absolutely.
What have you? Yes. So
what are the results? It takes you 1 inch further to what they say about global geopolitics. Every country is in it for itself. No country is in distance to do you a favor, per se. It is what you're able to negotiate, what you're able to learn, what you're able to extract from these relationships to build up your own domestic needs, solve your own domestic problems and challenges. That's why I think that on the issue of diaspora, which has become very critical in Nigeria's relations with the rest of the world, both in terms of politics. Take a look at it. The leader of the Conservative Party of Great Britain is the Nigerian, Kemi Badenoch, was Nigerian, born by Nigerian parents, bred by Nigerian parents in Nigeria before she finally took up British citizenship as her preferred choice of nationality. And today, she is likely, it's not impossible that if the next election comes and she succeeds, she becomes the Prime Minister of Great Britain. Now, can you bring the issue of Nigerians and diaspora into this perspective and see their importance, their relevance? They are politically relevant because they have votes. They can change the course of events in the UK for the benefit of Nigeria. But what is Nigeria investing in them? In these negotiations, are we insisting that the Foreign Office and the Home Office should not treat Nigerian diaspora people or people seeking to travel from Nigeria to the UK for legitimate purposes, legitimate businesses? You don't over-restrict them. You don't over-exploit them. Take a look at what happens in European, American embassies in Nigeria, for instance. People go in the morning and they stay forever, and at the end of the day, you pay such a huge sum of money and you don't get the visa and it's not refundable. Has diplomacy become a business of exploiting the weaker people? These are questions. There have been various foreign ministers who try to address these matters of the visa issue. Yes, are there abuses that are easy to check? There are. But there are genuine Nigerians seeking to do business in the UK. seeking to do their medicals in the UK, seeking various investments, even in mutual capacities. And sometimes they find it very difficult to travel as and when they feel they should. That is something that is a low-hanging fruit. The president could bring up at the highest level of the British government that Nigerians in the UK diaspora are making huge contributions to the stability, security, to the economic well-being of the UK, and they should not be treated any differently than other Britons are treated. Because in Nigeria, as you and I well know, Britons in Nigeria are treated even sometimes much better than the citizens of Nigeria themselves. These are realities of life. And we should expect some reciprocity in all of this. Please, Mr. President is going to spend a few days in the UK speaking to the highest levels of political authority of British royalty. And this is an opportunity to stress these things. Issues of migration. Issues of migration are important to Nigeria because today, as we have said, much of the remittances we get from the diaspora population is what's keeping so many families at the micro level of economy, at the microeconomic level. That is what's keeping so many families stable and going. Because times are very difficult, but they get these monthly or annual remittances from their children and so on in the UK and the places, and it keeps them going and keeps the Nigerian economy buoyant. So that is one area. But we have to go still back to the issue of security and insecurity. A lot of agreements have been signed, MOUs and so on. How have these MOUs, including with Britain, how have they helped Nigeria to begin to overcome its insecurity problem since 1999, since 2010, since 2011, when this terrorist insurgency became a major problem for Nigeria. It's 15 years is a long time in a country's life. And 15 years is a long time Nigeria cannot afford to continue in this state of insecurity. It is not diminishing. It is becoming more bloody. It's becoming more alarming, more destabilizing. And the opportunity to talk nitty-gritty. Yes, the National Security Advisor has a wonderful team, but now they should concretize on precise things Nigeria can exploit from the British capabilities in order to strengthen Nigeria's own capacities to deal with this problem. If we deal with that, deal with the issues of migration and immigration, deal with the issues of respect for our diaspora population in Britain and so on, I think for much of the other things that Nigeria needs to grow and stabilize, they are domestic. They can be sorted out.
Prof, let's talk a bit more about the question of diaspora. How do you think, for instance, that Nigeria can actually leverage more strategically its diaspora population for investment and, in fact, for development purposes?
So far, apart from China, I think Nigeria is the second producer of human resource for the world, not just for the UK, across the world. We produce thousands of people with capacity, with skill that the world is utilizing. The question is, what is the value in terms of this diaspora contribution to the global economy for Nigeria? That is a critical asset that the Nigerian government must look at. I understand that there are many Nigerians who jabbed because of what they see as the challenge with our own local issues and how the search for greener pastures taking them out. But there are many who are out there, not because Nigeria is not doing well, but also because the skills that they have out there are being utilized. So we have an Office for Diaspora Engagement, which I think need to do more in terms of ensuring that there is a very strong connection between the diaspora community out there and Nigeria. For instance, the level of contribution. What is the level of diaspora contribution in terms of investment back home? And how is that contributing to the growth of the Nigerian economy? My expectation is that Mr. President will also meet with the diaspora community to look at how well that such a resource is harnessed and also appreciated. Because for some of us who travel around this world, one of the concerns the diaspora community will always raise is that Nigeria does not appreciate what we do. Yes, we are working here, we make remittances back home, but you don't see that level of appreciation. The question is bring back, but not much is being done. And I think we need to commend Mr. President, and I'll give one example. The current Minister of Humanitarian Affairs is a diaspora. He was based in the UK. He was identified and brought back to Nigeria and is managing the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. That's an appreciation of the contribution of the diaspora community in terms of how we're able to bring them back here to contribute their own quota to national development. Other successful administrations have done that. But I think for me it's important that we identify this. When it comes to technology, this is an area that we are yet to maximize. We've got many Nigerians out there with the kind of skill that will help jumpstart our own effort in ensuring that Nigeria becomes a major actor in technology. It is not enough for Nigeria to be a recipient of technological support. We've got the skills. We need to build the infrastructure that will respond to the huge market that we have here. China is a major beneficiary of our market because of the population we have. The question is, what is it about that technology that Nigeria cannot invest? Certainly, we can invest. All we need is the right leadership to ensure that we bring back these Nigerians that have the skill to come and invest their own brains here in the country in order to also develop young Nigerians that are doing their own little best in ensuring that they place Nigeria on the technology map. And the same for security. Today, security is technology-driven. How well are we leveraging on technology to address our security concerns? Many countries today are going beyond boots on the ground to begin to look at the space as a major domain of warfare. What capabilities do we have? Is the Nigerian military battle ready when it comes to space capacity? How do we deploy that with the precision, almost zero collateral damage? How well are we positioned? UK has that capacity. The visit of Mr. President should be one that is able to place these issues on the table with a view to getting the support. So I see Mr. President's visit happening in two ways. One, getting the UK government to identify areas of critical need that it can support. Two, getting the Nigerian diaspora to also look at areas that they can be of help when it comes to the role that technology can play in our national security challenges. And that's why
the president should be taking with him a shopping list that you have put forward like this. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, Prof. Ambassador, one last word here, and this has to do with the fact that very early on as a nation, we adopted the non-aligned foreign policy. Now, the fact that today, in the emerging global order, the nations of the non-aligned movement now have the opportunity of seeking relations and strategic relations with very many countries without having to be tied to the apron strings of either the West or East. It brings up this question of how Nigeria can actually balance strengthening relations with the United Kingdom and, of course, expanding relations with these other world powers.
Indeed, this is a subject that is so broad in the concept of global geopolitics today that if Nigeria, as a former non-aligned country, is still thinking in terms of alignment with, in relations with Britain, because we now have a closer strategic partnership with the UK, we cannot have a similar strategic, even deeper relationship with China or with America or with Canada and so on. That is wrong thinking. In fact, the strongest instrument Nigeria has in approaching the global community as it is today is the African continent itself. And probably this is where, when the president has finished with all these extra-continental engagements, it is time to begin to think Afrocentric again, because regionalization is what is driving the world. That is what is driving everybody. Even China knows that it cannot project all the economic influence and power it can now without making its home front as strong and as friendly and as aligned with Chinese views as possible. That is why whatever happens, China is not being violent, using violence as a means of achieving its aims in the South China Sea. Nigeria is in a similar position to leverage, not just on the AU, but on the AU Agenda 2060.